Perfect. We are going to get started with our council meeting. So, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We are happy to be returning to our hybrid pilot meetings, which we plan to continue with for as long as it is safe. I am certainly glad to be back on site with my council colleagues, council staff, Madam Mayor, and the public attending in person. If you are here joining us on site, the council is following CDC guidelines to prevent and reduce transmission of COVID-19 and maintain healthy business operations and work environments. Also, per the Mayor's Executive Order 3 of 2021, masks and face coverings are required while in city facilities, even if vaccinated. Everyone, please keep your face coverings on at all times during the meeting. For people who are signed up for public comment, feel free to remove your mask once your name has been called and you are at the microphone to address the council. Our staff members are also helping with seating and spacing so that we can maintain a 6-foot social distancing. Thank you. At this time, if we could all stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I did want to also make sure to mention that we are still, as per the hybrid, streaming everything and having people be allowed to join us virtually. So our public hearings, we will get to that. So you may have noticed on our agenda that we have our typical formal meeting agenda, and beforehand we also have a quick local building authority agenda. As the city's elected officials, council members not only serve on the city council, we also serve as the local building authority board. Think of it as the council wearing different hats for each role. If you are joining us for the public comment opportunities we have later on the agenda, we are accepting your comments also through Webex, and for those whose only option is to call in, staff will be monitoring a separate telephone line. Before we begin our LBA agenda items, I want to mention and review our rules of decorum. There are guidelines that the City Council has always had in place to help keep our meeting moving in an orderly, civil, efficient way. And these rules also apply as we wear our LBA hats. These rules of decorum help us move through the agenda and give everyone the opportunity to voice their opinions without feeling intimidated. In order to achieve this, our rules of decorum begin from the moment you arrive in our virtual meeting or here in person. We respect all points of view and we welcome new insights. While giving your comments, please be respectful. Avoid yelling, profanity, making racial slurs, obscene, or defamatory remarks. I'd also encourage people to refrain from attacking others individually. We're here to listen to your comments on the issues that we are facing, and we would hope that you can stick to those issues with those comments. If you do decide to use profanity during your comment, if you're online, your line will be muted. If you're here, we will ask that you forfeit your time at the podium. And if any comments reach a level of disrespect, I will ask that you be muted, and you will forfeit your opportunity to address the council. Similarly, if there is a level of disrespect here in person, we'll ask you to forfeit your time at the podium. In addition, our staff will request for your name during the Webex registration process. Of course, those in attendance, we already got your name on the cards if you plan on speaking. So this is only in regards to our Webex folks. So we will ask for your name during the registration process. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of decorum. If your name doesn't meet this requirement, our staff will make contact with you to gather this information. Delaney Silman from our staff is helping to moderate the meeting and will be messaging with the attendees to coordinate on any questions with your commenting registration. That's online. Staff is handling a number of tasks, so please limit messages to technical issues and minimal changes to your registration. If you would like to send any comments, please feel free to. You can mail us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114. You can email us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or you can call us at 801-535-7654. This brings us to our local building authority potential action item, B1, regarding an ordinance with the local building authority budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2021-2022. I will look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton, a second, Board Member Wharton, excuse me, a second by Board Member Dugan. Do I need to roll call this? Cindy Lou, do you want me to roll call still? Okay, so any discussion on this? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. This concludes our local building authority agenda. I will ask for a motion to adjourn as the local building authority board and convene as the city council. Is there a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Wharton and a second by Board Member Dugan. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That also passes unanimously. We're now reconvening as, or convening, I suppose, as the city council. And we are at item D1. Sorry, lots of talking. The council will now look to approve the work session and formal meeting minutes of Tuesday, November 9th, 2021, and Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. I will look for a motion.
I move we approve the minutes for Tuesday, November 9th and Tuesday, November 16th, 2021.
Second.
I have a motion by Council Member Ferris, a second by Council Member Wharton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We are now at our public hearing section. All of the rules that I just went over as far as the decorum and giving comments still apply. Nothing has changed in the last 35 seconds. So please keep those in mind and we can move forward. Taylor Hill from our staff is going to be calling the names of those who wish to comment. We will call names of people joining on Webex and in person based on the order of registration or received comment cards. Once we open public comment, Taylor will announce 3 names at a time so that people can have some notice and be prepared to speak. When it is your turn to speak, Taylor will announce your name. For people in Webex, she will unmute your line and you may begin. For people in person, please feel free to step up to the podium, remove your mask, and make your comment into the microphone. Once you begin, please state your name and the 2-minute timer will start. At the 2-minute mark, the host will announce time and your microphone will be muted. That we can't mute you here. We will ask you to stop talking at that 2-minute time. If you are unable to finish your comment, please send the rest of your comment via email, mail, or calling our office. For those in Webex, our contact information is posted in the chat. If you do not wish to speak, please either message our staff or let them know, or when the host states your name, just let us know that you are here to listen. Our first public hearing combines items E1 through E7 as our first hearing. Before we begin taking comments, I will turn the time over to Sylvia Richards, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give a short introduction. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you. The city applies for and receives grants which help to support and fund some city programs. Each grant application is reviewed and then receives a public hearing, which gives the public an opportunity to comment on them. Tonight, there are 7 grants. The first is the Granary District Floodplain Mitigation Remapping COVID-19 Local Assistance Matching Grant Program, which would fund the Granary District Floodplain Mitigation and Remapping Project, including infrastructure improvements to the city's stormwater system to mitigate flood risk for at least 1,182 properties that are partially or completely located within the Federal Emergency Management Act designated 750-acre flood hazard area, which is concentrated in the Granary District, along the adjacent stretch of the Jordan River. The second grant is the new water reclamation facility influent Pump Station Force Mains COVID-19 Local Assistant Matching Grant Program, which would fund the construction of the new influent pump station Force Mains, which is a sub-project of the water reclamation facility and replaces the existing pump station and force mains that are at the end of their service life. Third is the Point Hotel COVID Local Assistance Matching Grant Program, which would assist with the change of use for the existing Airport Inn Hotel to the Point Hotel, which will be 100 units of extended stay for adults over 55 years of age and veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Fourth is the Foothills Natural Area and Bonneville Shoreline Trailhead Infrastructure Improvements Grant, which would fund infrastructure improvements at the Foothills Natural Area and Bonneville Shoreline Trailhead, including the construction of 5 public access trailheads. Fifth is the Utah Railroad Safety Grant 2021 Round 2, which would fund safety improvements to the Union Pacific Railroad crossing at 4900 West and 700 South. Sixth is the 800 East Neighborhood Byway 1300 South to 1700 South, fiscal year 22 Region 2 Transportation Alternative Program Grant, which would fund the construction of pedestrian and bicycle activated crossings, traffic circles, bulb out curb extensions, and neighborhood byway signage on 800 East from 13th South to 17th South. And last is the Solar Energy Innovation Network Round 3 multi-stakeholder team driving resilient and economic commercial solar and storage in underserved communities grant, which would support efforts to increase acceptance and use of commercial solar and/or storage in underserved communities. That's all for tonight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I will turn the time over to Taylor for our comment period.
Thank you, Council Chair. It looks like we have one person here to speak to these items this evening, and that will be George Chapman. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, I'm against the 800. What was that? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you,
We can
George.
hear
Okay. I'm against the 800 East grant applications. Its roundabouts and bulbouts are a costly and unnecessary addition to the quiet and bikeable 800 East. That money could be and should be better used to maintain West Side streets, which are still getting minimal street funding versus the East Side. And I know Salt Lake City just got a grant with UTA and University of Utah. You should have had a grant application hearing, but you didn't. So these are my comments on that grant. The grant to study and justify spending hundreds of millions of dollars to extend the Red Line to the Central Station ignores the fact that the West Side transit options are still getting second backseat. They're just not getting the funding. West Side has to bear with zigzag milk run bus routes, and they deserve electric buses and $1 fares, but not the new disrespectful UTA documentation system for half fare. Salt Lake City should push UTA to implement $1 bus fare countywide and implement electric buses on the West Side with better routes. And this idea that we need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the East Side, what about the West Side? So I'm against the UTA grant with Salt Lake City Transportation that they just got, because it kind of puts the West Side in the back seat and actually in the trunk. Those are my comments.
All right, and then we had one more person registered for this item, and that will be Polly Hart. Polly, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. I also just registered under the name Polly Smith because I was already registered and hadn't signed up to comment. So thank you. I desperately want to encourage the grant application for the Foothills Natural Area trailhead infrastructure. the number of trails above the avenues and, well, primarily the avenues in the last couple of years have doubled, more than doubled. And not one parking space has been added, not one bathroom has been added. And if you were to go up to 18th Avenue or the top of Terrace Hills on a Saturday morning, people have counted over 100 cars parked at those trailheads. And the neighbors are not happy. I am not one of those neighbors, but I certainly understand that their streets are just completely parked up with all of the users for the Foothills. So we desperately need the infrastructure to go along with those foothills, and I want to encourage you to move forward with that. Thank you so much.
Okay, and then we just had one more person register, and that will be Jen Colby. Jen, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. Jen Colby, District 4. I just want to chime in on a couple of these. I agree with Polly. I strongly support the Trailheads Infrastructure Improvements Grant as someone who uses the Foothills regularly, and I'm not burly enough to bike up there, sadly, even. I realize that there is a need for access. It's also been just so important during the pandemic. I think it really drove home how critical our public lands and open spaces are, and unfortunately how little of them in many of our neighborhoods we actually have, whether pocket parks or other things. So that is a great one. I hope that goes through. And then I want to say regarding the 800 East improvements in just those 4 blocks, I have a slightly different perspective. First, I really hope we can avoid East Side, West Side divisions and can see the improvements to our entire city. The mapping of the street conditions showed incredibly deteriorated streets all over the city, and some of the worst ones are actually in the near East Side neighborhoods. And I think we mix up the wealthier, fully East Side bench neighborhoods with Central City and some of the near East older neighborhoods. I also want to say that I highly encourage Salt Lake City Transportation to really rethink what they consider major improvements and upgrades. I have been watching lots of videos. I highly recommend the Just Not Bikes channel. It's all about Netherlands planning. We are so far behind, and the bulb outs and these kind of improvements without such a complete rethinking of our streets, including our street patterns, these are really inefficient investments and really don't improve much in the way of pet safety. We have to completely overhaul things, and just sort of incremental little changes are not getting us there. 100 South is a complete disappointment. I can't believe we invested this much in that project, and it just shows how little we get. Thank you.
Okay, and that was our final commenter for these items.
Thank you to everyone who commented. Council members, I'll look for a motion on these items.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and refer items E1 through E7 to a future consent agenda for action.
Second.
I have a motion by Council Member Dugan and a second by Council Member Ferris. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. This brings us to our second public hearing, item E8. This is regarding an ordinance that would amend the zoning ordinance related to limit the amount of city culinary water that commercial and industrial land uses can utilize. Thank goodness that Nick Tarbett is going to give us a quick introduction to what I just said. So Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you before we go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, this proposal would limit the amount of city culinary water that commercial and industrial land uses can utilize. The zoning amendment would implement a 300,000 gallon a day limit. The limit affects multiple zones and multiple land use citywide. The ordinance would also amend and clarify definitions related definitions and terms. Currently, there's a 6-month temporary ordinance in effect that mirrors the proposed use and that expires on January 4th of 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Taylor, we can go to our commenters.
Thank you, Council Chair. It looks like we have 10 people here to speak to this item. The first of which will be Katie Newborn, followed by John Giles, and then Hedron Kubiesa. Katie, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. I would like to ask the council to adopt this amendment. With impending growth in industrial water demand for projects related to the Utah Inland Port, it's essential to impose responsible limits on future commercial and industrial water use. I encourage the council to consider additional opportunities to regulate these water users and all water users in Salt Lake City. With Great Salt Lake at record lows and no sign of relief from our persistent drought, it has never been more urgent for municipal policy to drive conservation and strategic water management. Please do everything in your power to conserve our precious water supply for our future and the future of our ecosystems. I hope you'll adopt this amendment as one step of many in the right direction. Thank you.
All right, and next we will hear from John Giles, followed by Hedron Kubiesa, and then Malin Mensch. John, you're now unmuted.
My name's John Giles, and I would just encourage you to extend this amendment. When I look up at the Wasatch Mountains that should be laden with snow and are not, I'm dismayed at the actions that are being taken by the cities to save water. Lawns that look like putting greens, city companies, the university, all watering the lawns like we have an endless supply. Lake Mead, Lake Powell, and the Great Salt Lake are drying up with the burden the humans have put on that precious natural resource. The result of this will be disastrous. Salt Lake City should be doing all it can to not encourage businesses that use a lot of water to locate here. Bevco, I believe, will be using more than 3 million gallons of water a day. The only other user comparable to that is the refinery. Salt Lake should be discouraging companies like this from opening in the Salt Lake Valley or anywhere else in Utah for that matter. When are we going to learn that water supply is not an infinite resource? Stop issuing water permits altogether until we can get a handle on the growth that is currently facing a lot of communities in the West. Growth has become our biggest liability. Stop the crazy decisions that are not part of the solution.
All right, and next we will hear from Hedron Kubiesa, then Malin Mensch, and then Jen Colby. Hedron, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. I would like to second the two previous speakers. Also speaking out in support of this amendment to mitigate the ecological and economical disaster that is most likely to occur if we don't take significant measures to reduce water diversion, especially in the regard to Great Salt Lake and its whole ecosystem. I hope that this will be the first step of radically innovative water conservation in the valley. Thank you.
All right, and next we will hear from Malin Mensch, followed by Jen Colby, and then Dorothy Owen.
This is Malin Mensch. Only two entities currently use 300,000 gallons of water daily. The U of U, which is exempt from this proposed regulation, and one oil refinery. The city needs a 200,000 gallon limit, one that will meaningfully conserve water. Why? Things are bad enough now, but few realize the depth of the water crisis that the city faces going forward. 4 years ago, I wrote an op-ed for the Tribune. It described a NASA study that plugged 1,000 years of climate history data for the American Southwest into 17 independent climate models. Those models found that current climate warming trends will drive enough moisture out of the soil of the American Southwest to create a drought deeper than the 10-year Dust Bowl of the 1930s, but lasting 3 times as long. Scientists now agree that the American Southwest is already experiencing the profound and prolonged drought that they predicted. If it lasts for a third decade, it will dry up the Great Salt Lake, cut the flow of the Colorado River in half, turn our forests into dead kindling, and increase their burn area by 500%. In short, it will spell both environmental and economic ruin for Utah and the Southwest. Snowpack is the lifeblood of the Mountain West's ecology and economy. Last Friday's New York Times describes a synthesis of a dozen new climate studies. Collectively, those studies predict that by 2050, our mountains will go entire decades without any measurable snowpack. Without replenishing snowmelt, our reservoirs will go dry each summer, and the Great Basin Dust Bowl will replace the Great Salt Lake. The day when the words Utah and wasteland will be uttered in the same breath must be delayed as long as possible. A meaningful 200,000 gallon.
And next we will hear from Jen Colby, followed by Dorothy Owen, and then Caroline Erickson. Jen, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. Jen Colby, District 4. I concur with the previous commenters and would also encourage considering a lower limit at the very minimum. Adopting this is a good step forward. I am also extremely concerned about the climate catastrophe that we are facing after this summer. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time on this as a sustainability coordinator for the University of Utah. Many leaders were talking about effects on their grandchildren, and I was always sort of sitting in the back waving my hand saying, no, no, it's us, it's us, it's us. And I'm in my 50s. I can already see the possibility of becoming a climate refugee from the city I had adopted as my permanent home and expected to stay for the rest of my life. This is incredibly important as we're looking at the equivalent of industrial sprawl throughout the west, the western part, the northwest quadrant. Unfortunately, thanks to the inland port, we already know that this sprawl is financially unsustainable and debt fueled, and putting the water use on top of that is problematic, but this water use extends to the entire valley. I was a member of the most recent Public Utilities Rate Review Advisory Group. It was clear current water rates for large users are inadequate to drive sufficient conservation, with egregious property tax subsidies making the market distortion even worse. So regulation is truly needed. Our only hope for is a general slowing of the rate of increase in water withdrawals, a focus on water conservation and ecosystem protection. Well-meaning residents are cutting outdoor watering to the point of killing street trees and perennials, while debt-fueled growth is making a mockery of residential conservation. This would at least be a good step toward equity. Thank you.
Okay, and now we will hear from Dorothy Owen, followed by Caroline Erickson, and then George Chapman. Dorothy, you're now unmuted.
My name is Dorothy Owen. I am the chair of the West Point Community Council. West Point is the home of the last agricultural land in Salt Lake City. It's also the community that's closest to the Great Salt Lake, and the people who live in this area are very sensitive to the water needs. I ask that you not only approve this amendment, but you make it much more stringent than just looking at 300,000 gallons as a limit. What the city does sets the tone for what you expect of our citizens, and there's absolutely no way that citizens can respect the, slow the flow logo when they know that the city is approving businesses that use millions of gallons of water every day. Your action sets the tone and will determine the success of the overall city's citizens in saving water. I'd also ask that the city conduct a investigation into how the Bovev plant was approved for using that much water. That's not just a case of not dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's more like leaving out the entire valves. There's a serious error there, and we have a professional responsibility to go back and make sure it never happens again. Thank you.
All right, and next we will hear from Caroline Erickson, followed by George Chapman, and then Lynn DeFreitas. Caroline is there in person.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Carolyn Erickson. I reside at 368 Emory Street, Poplar Grove. I would like to remind you that last March, Governor Cox declared a state of emergency due to the drought conditions. He asked Utahns to evaluate their water uses and find ways to save, not only because of current drought conditions, but also because we live in one of the driest states in the nation. Not only is Utah one of the driest states, it is the fastest growing state. But home water use accounts for only 15% of Utah's total consumption. Even if everyone followed every personal conservation guideline, it won't solve the problem. What will solve the problem? The city's Water Conservation Plan 2020 and the Water Shortage Response Summary seem vague and are based on voluntary aspirational goals. I am concerned, for example, as the previous speaker said, that manufacturing facilities like the 1.2 million square foot Vobev facility, which just opened in September, have good intentions. They say, quote, that they plan to leverage sustainable processes like water reclamation and solar power. But what is the reality? I haven't seen that when I drive by. Apparently, when the state enacted SB 234 in 2018, grabbing 16,000 acres in the Northwest Quadrant, they may have given away your power to limit water consumption within a land area that's 1/3 of the total land of Salt Lake City. Is that possible? Even in a drought emergency? I pray for rain, as the governor asked, but I also pray that you will have the wisdom and courage to find a way to limit water usage, preferably to 200,000 gallons per day or less. Thank you.
Okay, and now we will hear from George Chapman, followed by Lynn DeFreitas, and then Keenan Wells. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, I think this ordinance is not ready for prime time. I'm against it. I'm concerned, first of all, that the ordinance may discourage the refinery from upgrading their equipment to reduce pollution. That typically requires more water. The ordinance could also encourage the refinery to close, which would significantly increase gas prices. And I'm concerned about number 2, University of Utah. The University of Utah should be significantly decreasing their water use and implementing water-wise plantings. And I can't believe that the university isn't practicing what they preach about water use. And I know the university can't be touched by the city, but it can publicize their significant water use. And maybe the city should just start regularly listing the high water users. That might make more sense. And why is Salt Lake City watering lawns when it's so cold outside? It seems like the city is trying to water parks to discourage homeless camping and may have, in one case, contribute to a death. That is a waste of water. This city wastes water too. And this city is still planting plantings and medians and planters, and after digging up park strips, requiring that owners replant and maintain them. The park strip ordinance of this city needs updating first, since it wastes more water, in my opinion. Again, I don't think this ordinance is ready for prime time. Thanks for listening. Those are my comments.
And now we will hear from Lynn DeFreitas, followed by Keenan Wells. Lynn, you're now unmuted.
Thank you very much. I'm Lynn DeFreitas, the Executive Director of Friends of Great Salt Lake. I submitted lengthy comments earlier today to the City Council, to Laura Briefer, and to the Mayor. This timely recognition is an endorsement that there is an obvious and urgent need for Salt Lake City to act effectively and responsibly on behalf of the management of its water resources. Water resources that are already being stretched by impacts from climate change, a mega drought, and a growing population that continues to expect water to be here today, tomorrow, and in the future. According to Bryan McInerney, recently retired senior hydrologist and climate change scientist with the National Weather Service's Weather Forecast Office in Salt Lake City, the Great Basin is warming faster than the global average and is expected to warm an additional 8 to 10 degrees by 2100. Research has shown that our snowpacks through the western U.S., including the Great Basin, will be reduced by 80% by 2100. That's 80%. We're spending water we don't have, and it's time for us to stop. We need to realize that our water credit line is overdrawn. And although the lake is calling the loan due, public health, our environment, our collective quality of life is in the balance. We urge Salt Lake City Council to amend the text and so that we as a community can demonstrate our belief in responsible water conservation practices. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
And finally, we will hear from Keenan Wells, who is also there in person.
Hello, this is Keenan Wells, District 4. On this day in the year 2000, 21 years ago, I had been skiing for almost 2 months. I haven't had a good ski year yet this year. That's been a pattern for a while. We're kind of running out of water here. And I really think you should approve limiting the use of water, even below what this amendment provides, but at very least this level. The fact that we're excluding the University of Utah is a little bit disappointing. They could use a little bit of work as well, but this amendment is absolutely necessary if I or my children are ever going to have good ski years again. If there's not water in the lake for the lake effect, we don't get snow. Thanks.
And that was our final commenter for this item.
Great. Thank you to everyone who commented today. Council members, I'm going to look for a motion on this.
Madam Chair, I move the council close the public hearing and adopt the ordinance with the following change to the final draft. Any new commercial or industrial land use that consumes or uses more than an annual average of 200,000 gallons of potable water per day is prohibited. I further move the council initiated legislative action requesting administration review and research potential amendments to the city's water conservation policies and come back to the council with recommendations for ordinance changes. Potential policies could include, but would not be limited to, additional zoning amendments, rate structure changes, or review of supply-demand studies to evaluate conservation needs. I further move the council-initiated legislative intent requesting administration work with the parties under the existing development agreement in the Northwest Quadrant to commit to adhering to this water use restriction ordinance because the city believes it is a safe code that is required to meet legitimate concerns regarding the public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Dugan, a second by Councilmember Ferris, by Councilmember Valdemoros. Any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We are on to something else. Agenda item 9, which is a public hearing regarding the master plan amendment and rezone at 129 South, 700 East, and 758 East Bueno Avenue. I will first turn the time over to Bryan Fulmer, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give a short introduction. Bryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
This property is on the interior block bordered by 100 and 200 South and between 700 and 800 East. The applicant proposes constructing a 4-story apartment building with 65 1 to 4 bedroom apartments, or a total of 192 total bedrooms. Each bedroom would be leased individually and have a private bathroom. Kitchen and living room spaces in each apartment would be shared among residents within the unit. 72 on-site parking spaces are included in the proposal. A single-story amenity and leasing building fronting on 700 East is also proposed as part of the development. Thank you.
Taylor, we can start with public comment. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you, Council Chair. It looks like we have 15 people here to speak to this item. The first of which will be Melinda Main, followed by Jen Colby, and then Reed Snyderman. And Melinda is there in person.
Good evening. My name is Melinda Main, and I live in the Bryant neighborhood, which is about a block from this property. And I'm also co-chair on the East Central Community Council, which I'm representing right now tonight. So the East Central Community Council does not support these proposed changes and modifications to our neighborhood. The ECC does not find this request consistent with various adopted city plans, including the Central Community Master Plan. The proposal does not meet the criteria for changes to the plan. It's also the opinion of the ECC Executive Board and Community Development Land Use Committee that this proposal in its current configuration will not address the need for more moderate-priced workforce housing. This proposal would destroy more of the precious existing naturally occurring workforce housing in our community, again displacing more of our elders, families, workforce, and vets. One by one, each person's life matters. One by one, each house matters. We continue to discourage the displacement of existing neighbors who depend on moderately priced homes they are currently renting. We oppose the continued destruction of the fabric of our neighborhoods by classifying existing workforce housing as worthless and beyond repair. There are many programs and tax advantages. We propose, as we'd like to help development, that the plan be modified to develop the portion of the property that is already zoned RMF 45 without tearing down affordable housing or replacing with the proper zoning for that area. The plan impacts neighborhood quality of life, privacy, noise, traffic, density, light, destruction of another inner court, development pattern, history, non-sustainable practices, etc., of the existing neighborhood. Unintended consequences follow from these changes. I respectfully encourage you to review all comments written and spoken opposing this zoning change. Thank you very much.
Okay, and next we will hear from Jen Colby, followed by Reed Snyderman, and then Rich Wilcox. Jen, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. Jen Colby, District 4. Please vote no on the proposed upzoning. This is just no bueno. I agree with the final Planning Commission negative recommendation. There are numerous conflicts with the area master plan surrounding block context and many impacts that cannot be mitigated even with a development agreement. The master plan highlights these interior courts as distinctive pattern languages of this neighborhood, deliberately designed for smaller scale workforce housing on small lots. It's the kind of pattern smart growth advocates are trying to bring back, and a terrible mistake to eliminate it. What goes where is in context is zoning 101. Keeping development in the correct zones is crucial for preventing more rampant real estate speculation in dysfunctional neighborhoods and infrastructure. This is speculative real estate investment. It's worth a gamble for developers to bid high on contracts for lower zone properties, file applications for a minimum fee, and then take a chance the city might grant an upzone and gift them a few $100,000 or more in inflated land values. Why go to Las Vegas if your odds seem really good here? This upzoning would lay the groundwork for a massive luxury rooming house ideal for short-term stays.
Lower income local renters can't afford luxury, even 200 square feet of it. I ran the numbers, and claims of social benefit are PR spin. On a per square foot basis, the rents would be 50% above a studio or one bedroom in the newer mid-rise with no private kitchen or living space. There are cheaper units in the older buildings for sure. Make no mistake, this is a high return to investor product being sold to you as a solution to the very real housing needs of the city. Nearly every renter who spoke at the Planning Commission hearing made it clear this is not the housing type they want. Good things happen when the council rejects bad upzoning proposals like this one. For example, the Haxton Apartments on 9th East, the project was redesigned and built within zoning. For the 5 200 South houses, the threats of teardowns were a bluff. The owners have painted, fixed them up, and re-rented them. Please resist being swayed by claims of houses in disrepair or high infrastructure costs. This is not a criteria for rezoning, and fuels more demolition by neglect. Thank you.
And next we will hear from Reed Snyderman, followed by Rich Wilcox, and then Michael Augustine. Reed, you're now unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Reed Snyderman here. I'm reaching out in support of the rezone. I think that this innovative project is going to provide some attainably priced housing that is otherwise non-existent in Salt Lake. It's offering Class A quality apartments designed to be rented by individual private bedrooms as opposed to units. And this will actually open up attainably priced housing to the missing middle income earners. I think one of the issues we need to consider here is if the zoning doesn't change, the incentive for the developer would be to build luxury apartments, and that is, just like the last speaker said, no bueno. So actually going with the RMF 45, like the surrounding units, provides more housing that we are in fact in desperate need of. You know, a critical member of Salt Lake City's workforce will be able to rent an individual room with shared kitchen and living room space with a few other individuals at a rental rate that's accessible and attainable, far below what a typical studio would be in the same area. You know, teachers, healthcare workers, first responders, young professionals, students, people that are getting priced out of the community would have access, and they're in critical need of housing at an attainable rate. So I encourage you to vote for this. Thank you.
Right, and next will be Rich Wilcox, followed by Michael Augustine, and then Bruce Johnson. Rich, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. Rich Wilcox, District 4 resident here. City Council members, please vote to uphold the negative recommendation from the Planning Commission on the matter of a request for a rezone of properties located on Bueno Avenue. Although this private street has been neglected by current and past owners of the properties, it has great potential for development of an interesting and useful mix of residential styles while working within the current SR3 zoning to preserve the character of this mid-block setting. The proposed leap to a huge complex of 192 single-room units would obviously come at a high cost to the neighborhood in terms of an enormous increase in number of vehicles accessing the property, as well as impacts from the proposed setback variances on all properties on all sides of the property under consideration. That the proposed use would also add 0 new options for family housing while demolishing several old but very salvageable or already rehabilitated homes makes it that much worse. If the developer really wants to build something that requires RMF 45 zoning on the entire lot, they should do so on one of the many underdeveloped lots in Salt Lake City already zoned for that use. If they're committed to building on Bueno, they have an exciting opportunity to breathe new life into this street with a mix that could include townhouses, apartments, and micro or traditionally sized houses. The type of imaginative and appropriately scaled housing that the city needs and that meets the carefully and intentionally developed goals of the governing Central Community Master Plan. Thank you for your time and consideration of these comments.
Next, we will hear from Michael Augustine, followed by Bruce Johnson, and then Keenan Wells. Michael, you're now unmuted.
Hi, happy Tuesday evening. This is Michael Augustine. I am the developer with Altaterra Real Estate, and I thank you for the time this evening. We are very excited to offer a project that is driven by kind of mission driven through innovative design, leasing to allow for a level of affordability that is not being seen with new apartment development in the city. We're doing this fully privately funded. We are not seeking any subsidies from any level, any grants. This is privately funded. We're very excited to sort of bring this affordability, concept, to the east side of the city as well, which has been really lacking. We are developing other projects in the city that do not meet affordability, so this one is particularly important to us. We have really enjoyed thus far speaking with different departments and offices across the city to see what is possible to serve certain groups of the workforce in Salt Lake City. Thank you for your time.
And now we will hear from Bruce Johnson, followed by Keenan Wells, and then Ian Johnson. Bruce, you're now unmuted.
Hi, this is Bruce Johnson. I'm a member of the community, and I'm recommending a yes vote on this. Just doing my own brief survey doesn't show anything close to affordable for an individual in the area, especially a teacher or a student or anybody in that specific area. The current conditions of the units are tear down, and they should have been demolished a long time ago. But what that leaves is, with the current zoning, the option for a developer to simply put up expensive townhomes there, which is what any developer is going to put up. And I think if we are able to unify the zoning and allow a developer to come in and put a well thought out intention project there, that's going to benefit the community the most. Yeah, I appreciate the time and hope that you vote yes on this.
Now we will hear from Keenan Wells, followed by Ian Johnson, and then Cindy Cromer. Keenan is there in person to speak.
Hello. Some of you may remember me. I was at East Central Community Council meeting, and I asked some very specific questions about units, beds, and parking. I actually now have a firm number for units, beds, and parking. So we've got 72 parking spaces for 65 units. Sounds great on paper, but then we need to evaluate the fact that we're planning to rent 2 to 4 beds in each of these units, at which point those 72 parking spaces don't sound great anymore. In fact, they would be well below the city's limit for parking spaces if we were treating this as units for actual housing. So interesting decision with parking there. Second, I'm a renter, and I'd like to talk about affordability and dignity. When this developer introduced their apartment to the community council, they referred to it as attainable luxury housing. It's interesting they have now changed their description to affordable. To me, affordable is an apartment, is the apartment I live in right now, in a very similar cul-de-sac interior block area. I pay significantly less rent for this single bedroom apartment than I would in a 50-year-old home than I would for an apartment in the new development. This doesn't have luxury features. It doesn't have its own shared theater or hot tub or meeting room, but it does have a kitchen, which means I can cook for myself. And that cuts down on cost, which is important for people who aren't making a whole lot of money. It also has my own bathroom, which lends a certain amount of dignity. As someone who has shared an apartment with 4 other people before, your choice of roommate is paramount. This new leasing structure would mean that I don't get to choose my own roommates.
And next we will hear from Ian Johnson, followed by Cindy Cromer, and then Brody Mead. Ian, you're now unmuted.
So I am for this proposition. I think that anything bringing more affordable housing into Salt Lake is a really big opportunity for the city and needs to be taken advantage of. So I'm in full favor.
Okay, and now we will hear from Cindy Cromer, followed by Brody Mead, and then Jeff Taylor. Cindy, you are unmuted.
Hi, you already have a great deal of commentary from me about this proposal. Tonight, I want to respond to the question that some of you have articulated. Why were there 2 hearings at the Planning Commission, and why did the recommendation change? You received a response from the planning staff at the work session. It did not do justice to what happened. It was far more complicated than different members of the commission showed up in September. I sent you the details from the record this afternoon. On June 23rd, the commission held a hearing on 4 proposals associated with the site. Regarding the 2 before you now, there were 2 people in favor, one of them the seller, and 9 people opposed. The commission voted 4-2 in favor of the zoning change and master plan amendment. Then in July, the commission had to meet again and recall the motion. Then they had to recall the recall. Both of those votes were unanimous, and of course there was no public comment. In September, the commission held another public hearing on the master plan and zoning change. This time 4 people spoke in favor and 18 people spoke against the proposals. I might add that it appears that the supporters of this proposal have figured out that you got to show up, because there are more of them here already than have ever shown up before. The first motion to support the request resulted in a 2-2 vote, and the chair broke the tie. And the second motion was also a 2-2 vote, and again, the chair broke the tie. But the interesting thing about all of this is that one of the commissioners changed position between the first vote in June and the second vote in September. So it appeared that the chair was making the call, but it was actually the commissioner who changed positions. And that commissioner always pays a great deal of attention to what's going on. So you have my notes. Thank you very much.
And next we will hear from Brody Mead, followed by Jeff Taylor, and then Jude Rubidoux. Brody, you're now unmuted.
Hi there, thanks for having me. I am a young professional living in Salt Lake, and I used to go to school right around the proposed site. And I am in favor of RMF 45 because I understand the kind of people that are living in this area and the struggle for affordable housing in this area. So once again, I am in favor of RMF 45.
And now we will hear from Jeff Taylor, followed by Jude Rubidoux, and then George Chapman. Jeff is in person to speak.
Good, thank you. My name is Jeff Taylor. I'm one of the current owners of the properties. And I'd like to share with you something that was really important to us, and it was really important to Alta Terra and Councilwoman Valdemoros. And that was making sure that this development did not displace the current tenants or put them at risk. So almost a year ago, we sat down with every single tenant that we had, discussed this proposal with them, and sought to see what their needs were. And that was great because a couple of them that we thought may need help absolutely didn't need help, but a couple of them did. And so we were able to provide deposit assistance to them to help them move in to their new places. You've actually got letters from those tenants. Dorian is one of them, and David is the other. That assistance is still in place. We are going to be supporting any tenant that needs assistance. What's the current situation right now? 3 of the 6 homes that are at the core of this proposal are currently vacant. The first one was David Beam. He's currently living in a clean, safe apartment, and he's paying half in rent to what he paid us. The other is, pardon me, I'm needing to remember this, Stacy. He moved to Tennessee. He bought a house on 5 acres. That just happened in November. And then Gillian, she just bought a home up in Layton. So those guys are all great. Our other 3 tenants that are currently in the homes are all new tenants. They're paying near market rates. They're all fully aware of the development, and they're fine with it. So there's that. A few facts about the property as it stands. 5 of the 7 homes have no structural foundations. They're literally sitting on earth. We've got about 1,000 feet of private sewer lines and sewer laterals that are in various states of disrepair and failure. There's no curb, gutter, sidewalk, or street.
It's time,
I
sir.
apologize.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Now we will hear from Jude Rubidoux, followed by George Chapman, and then Jared Zem. Jude, you're now unmuted.
Good evening. I've listened to all these comments, and I agree with all of them that are against the development for a lot of reasons. I love living downtown. I love riding the bus, walking to the store, living downtown. So I think that the property at Bueno is a promising opportunity, and maybe Mr. Taylor could find another way. Maybe these guys are the cat's pajamas, but it seems like people ought to stay with the existing zoning under the Central Community Master Plan. So I wish you do not grant the requested upzoning, and thanks for your hard work on this matter. Jude Rubidoux, D4.
And now we will hear from George Chapman, followed by Jared Zemp, and then Mark Mackless. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, I urge the City Council to recognize the negative impact that this rezone could have on affordable housing in the city. This will encourage similar rezoning of older residences en masse that could result in significantly reduced affordable housing. I mean, this should be obvious. This is not affordable since it increases the cost per square foot of renting in this city, and this city should not be encouraging more market rate and increasing rental rates. This is not affordable housing. This is market rate housing, 100% market rate housing. Approving this rezone will encourage hyperdevelopment, super gentrification, increased rental rates, and make renters look in other cities like Layton, resulting in driving more and more pollution. Please don't approve the rezone and send a message to the developers that this city does not want to throw out moderate income residents with super gentrification. You're going to get a lot of developers throwing a lot of proposals at you if you don't send the message now. Stop it. Please do not approve this rezone. Those are my comments. Thanks for listening.
Now we will hear from Jared Zemp, followed by Mark Mackless. Jared, you... I am going to troubleshoot with Jared, and we are going to move on to Mark Mackless, who is there in person.
My name's Mark Mackless, and I'm also part of the property ownership. I get to be the property manager. And so I'm actually taking care of all these houses and trying to keep the tenants in a safe, livable kind of place. And I manage probably 50 units in the city, and they're all 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. The pressure that's on these rentals is absurd. I understand, and there's got to be a creative way that we can address the need. I probably have 15 to 30 applicants on the first day. That's the last day. We have some tenants who are moving out of the city because they just can't find anything. And this is a creative idea that allows for a safe, nice, creative solution to what we're looking at in the city of just not having enough housing. And so I really hope you can support this. And it just is it's a great idea that might work, might alleviate some of the pressure.
And we will go back to Jared Zen. Jared, you're now unmuted.
Great, thank you. Not sure what happened earlier. Hey, I have lived up next to the university for about 15 years, and regardless of whatever the zoning rules are, it is overrun by students living in unauthorized mother-in-law apartments, parking anywhere and everywhere. You know, parties late at night. They started calling my street the beer pong district. and regardless of whatever city ordinances weren't being enforced and the way it was zoned, there was nobody to hold responsible for this stuff. And what I really love about the proposed development is that somebody stands up and says, it's me, I'm the one who's responsible for this area. I drove through it, the Bueno area, and the parking is pell-mell on dirt, and the houses have been recently painted, many of them, but foundationless. And I look forward to any sort of solution that actually brings a responsible party to the table. That's exciting to me, and I think Alta-Terra can do that. I went to the climate summit in Glasgow a few weeks ago, and I stayed in housing like this. And there was nothing undignified about it. The people there were thoughtful. The people there were informed and educated, and it was a great way for us to for a meeting of like minds. I look forward to having this type of housing here in Salt Lake. There's a similar project up near the university that is nothing short of predatory, and that results from a greater supply, which drives down the price. And that's exactly how this works. This kind of supply will drive down the price. And I'm glad to see developers like Alta-Terra will take responsibility and won't engage in predatory behavior. Thank you.
And that was our final comment for this item.
Great, thank you. Thank you to everyone who commented. I know that a few of you did get cut off at that 2-minute mark. So please, if you have other comments, feel free to send them our way by any of the other means that we have to communicate with us as council members. So with that, I will look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a council member. I have a motion by Council Member Dugan and a second by Council Member Valdemoros. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. I want to say we have a lot of public hearings. I know there are people in the audience waiting, and we have people online waiting, but we are going to take just a short 5-minute break. So thanks, everyone. we are back, and we are on agenda item number 10. This is a public hearing on the rezone at Redwood Road and Indiana Avenue. Before we begin taking comments, I am going to turn the time over to Council Staff Policy Analyst Nick Tarbett. Nick, take it away.
Yep, thank you very much. As you mentioned, this is a rezone for the properties at 835 South Redwood Road and 1668 West Indiana Avenue from R15000 to RMU 45. The property at 1668 West Indiana currently contains an individual single-family dwelling, and the other property is vacant. This item did have a work session briefing earlier today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and I'll turn to Taylor for a public comment.
Council Chair, we do not have anyone here to speak to this item.
Okay, in that case, I will turn to look for a motion.
Trying to find. No.
I move the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Ferris, a second by Councilmember Dugan. Any discussion on this? Nope. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. That passes unanimously. And I'm sorry, I was laughing because I almost called Councilmember Ferris Councilmember Fowler, but that's me. So we are on to agenda item number 11. This is in regards to an ordinance allowing commercial uses on rooftops which exceed 2 stories. Again, I am going to turn to Nick Tarbett for a brief introduction before we get to our first public comments. Nick?
Thank you. This proposal would amend the form-based special purpose corridor edge subdistrict, the FBSE, to allow for rooftop commercial uses above the 2nd story, subject to meeting a height of 30 feet. The proposed amendment affects a couple different sections of the zoning ordinance, and all properties citywide in the FBSE would be impacted by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Taylor will turn to public comment.
Looks like we have 4 people here to speak to this item, the first of which will be Paxton Goodman, followed by Judy Short, and then Bill Grodnick. Paxton, you are now unmuted.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm the attorney who represents the applicant. We're very excited to present this proposal to you tonight. You may already know this, but to make sure you're clear, rooftop dining is already allowed in this zone on single-story properties. So this would simply allow for rooftop dining to occur on second-story, 2-story buildings as well. It's definitely a progressive use. We're excited to introduce it into this market. My client has already had this property engineered and built and designed to allow for the rooftop use. They will clearly comply with building code requirements and all other requirements from a safety perspective. But in this environment where some restaurants anyway have really been hit hard by the COVID pandemic, this allows for more flexibility, it allows for wider appeal, and it will certainly allow for this restaurant use to succeed in this location. This property is, it's buffered from the residents. There's a 6-foot cement buffer wall at the back to help contain the noise and the activity. They'll still have to comply with other noise regulations. It's sort of a seasonal use, weather permitting, but we're very excited about this, and we appreciate all the support from staff to get this text amendment to this point in the process. Thank you very much.
Now we will hear from Judy Short, followed by Bill Grodnick, and then George Chapman. Judy, you're now unmuted. Okay, we will move on and circle back to Judy and go to Bill Grodnick.
I'm an, I gotta unmute here. Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, so I own one of the buildings in the zoning district, and outdoor dining is really critical for success of restaurants these days. People want to eat outdoors, and restaurants want to offer that amenity. And our building is really set up for it already to have a rooftop dining experience. And so we hope that the council will approve the text amendment, and we're looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, and now we will hear from George Chapman and then go back to Judy Short. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, I'm against allowing the commercial use on rooftops in the FBSE zone since it essentially increases customer space 50% without an increase in parking. Noise and parking problems could have a significant negative impact on adjacent residents, and school kids especially could be impacted by the noise of a popular facility that will continue way after 8 o'clock and when kids are supposed to be going to bed. This is a potential very popular use as a rooftop restaurant or a bar, but I remind the council that an adjacent rooftop bar restaurant has had a lot of noise complaints, and it never went away. It's right next to this potential property, or proposal. So it actually is a fantastic idea. The idea of a rooftop bar restaurant, it's a great idea, but it requires more noise and parking requirements. This could go in any area, and it'll be asked for by many developers because it is such a great idea. But I urge you to send it back to staff for mitigation of parking and noise requirements before reconsidering it. Thanks for listening.
Okay, and we will go back to Judy Short. Judy, you're now unmuted.
This is Judy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. This afternoon, I sent you a letter with the comments I received from members of the Sugar House community. And it's clear from the various comments that people are confused by what they're reading. So I think the ordinance needs some editing for clarity before you approve it. We have two concerns. One is sound, and Salt Lake County does a terrible job of noise enforcement. So we'd like you to put in the ordinance materials that can be used to block the noise and more specifics about noise. The second thing is that we don't like the idea of putting this right next to a parcel that has a single family house on it. And so we think that particular issue needs to be a conditional use. It's different if it's RMF 35 or 45, those are taller buildings. But when you've got a one-story house, this could look potentially right into the backyard and take away the privacy and add noise in that backyard. So that piece needs to have a conditional use. Other than that, we approve this ordinance. We think it'll be a lot of fun.
All right, and that was our last comment for this item.
Thank you to everyone who commented on this. I will look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Council Member Dugan, a second by Council Member Ferris. Any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We are on agenda item number 12, which is a public hearing on the alley vacation at 1200 block of Kensington and Bryan Avenues. I will turn the time over to Bryan Fulmer for an introduction on this before public comment. Thanks, Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a proposal to vacate an east-west city-owned alley at approximately 1550 south between the McClellan Trail at 1200 East and 1300 East. The alley is impassable due to a garage obstructing access at the east end and other encroachments from abutting properties that have been in place for decades. The alley is closed. It will have no impact on Bellin Trail. This item had a briefing this afternoon, as you'll recall. Thank you.
Taylor?
Looks like we have one person here to speak to this item, and that will be Steve Black. Steve, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council on this proposal. I am the applicant for this. It is in the back of my property, which faces onto Kensington Avenue. We obtained signatures for more than 80% of the properties that had joined the alleyway, and unanimous active agreement that this is the right way forward and to honor the use that has been in place for more than 60 years that we can identify that the alley has never existed. And that's it. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
And that was our only comment on this item.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Council members, I will look for a motion on this.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and adopt the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Dugan, a second by Councilmember Ferris. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. I keep wanting to try to roll call because I'm used to that, so I'm just going to move that over there. Agenda item number 13 is a ordinance regarding the Columbus Street alley vacation north of Victory Road. And sorry, I'm going to turn the time over to Bryan Fulmer, our policy analyst, to give a short introduction. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you. This is a proposal to vacate a city-owned alley adjacent to properties in the 500 North block of Columbus Street and one property on Victory Road. The alley segment to the north was vacated previously, and a UDOT right-of-way is to the south of the alley. The alley is undeveloped and exists only on paper, and as you'll recall, you had a briefing on this one as well this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan. Taylor?
Council Chair, it looks like we do not have anyone here to speak to this item.
Okay, I will look for a motion, council members.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and adopt the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Dugan, a second by Councilmember Ferris. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We are now on item 14, the public hearing regarding a resolution that would authorize sublease arrangements at the Leonardo. Before we turn to public comments, I will turn the time over to Ben Ledke, one of our council staff policy analysts, to give a short introduction. Thanks, Ben.
This item would authorize the mayor's administration to approve sublease requests at the Leonardo. Any sublease request would need to satisfy 3 requirements. 1, it must serve a public purpose. 2, it must comply with the voter-approved bond purpose that paid for improvements to the old library building. And 3, have a direct connection to the Leonardo's mission and programming plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Taylor, we will turn the time over to public comment.
And we do not have anyone here to speak to this item either.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Council members, I will look for a motion on this.
Madam Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. That will be on a future agenda. We are on item E15, which is an ordinance regarding the Sugar House Business District Design Standards zoning text amendment. Before taking any comments, I will turn the time over to Russell Weeks, for one of our council policy analysts, for a brief introduction. Russell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item has been in the works since 2019. Council consideration really has been delayed because the issue was sort of put on hold due to COVID-19 and how the office, dealt with issues going in. But now the council is up for that the council may formally consider adopting the proposed ordinance tonight if it so chooses. The point of the proposed ordinance is to amend the Sugar House, is to amend zoning design standards in the Sugar House Business District, which contains 2 sub-districts. The ordinance is intended to do 3 things. 1, remove ambiguity in the ordinance pertaining to the design guidelines to meet the requirements of a law passed by the legislature. 2, to get rid of differences between the Sugar House Business District 1 and Sugar House Business District 2 planning sub-areas. And 3, to ensure that design regulations apply to all sizes of buildings in the Sugar House Business District and not just to large buildings. That is all I have to say about this issue right now.
Thank you, Russell. Taylor, we will turn to public comment.
Council Chair, we have 2 people here to speak to this item, which will be Judy Short and then George Chapman. And Judy, you are now unmuted.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have to correct Russell because the Sugar House Council started in 2018 working on this one. It's taken a long time and we're glad that it's here. I was pleased to see that looking at it, instead of just the text, but the ordinance itself, it's much more clear. The ambiguity is gone and I think he's done a great job with that. We still disagree that the maximum street-facing facade can be up to 200 feet. It should be 150 feet. We're not downtown, we're a village. 150 feet should be the maximum. Now there's 2 things. The staff report that he wrote says 300 feet. The ordinance says 200 feet. So I hope he means 200 feet or 150 feet would be my preference. And we certainly appreciate having the minimum sidewalk width be 10 feet. Anything we can do to improve walkability is always appreciated. Thank you. We're ready to get this done.
Judy, sorry, before we mute you, did you say there was a typo in the ordinance? Or just, I couldn't hear you very well.
Okay, in Russell's 8-page staff report, it refers to buildings being 300 feet. In the ordinance, it reads 200 feet.
Okay.
So just be sure that you're clear. We prefer 150 feet.
Right, but I think we compromised on 200.
Yes, Madam Chair, to clarify that it is the 200 feet that everyone reached agreement on. The 300 feet was the original proposal.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we clarified and didn't have any typos in the ordinance. Sorry to take up any of your time, Judy, if you had something else to say. You had a few minutes left.
No, that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you.
And next we will hear from George Chapman. George, you're unmuted.
Okay, I agree with everything Judy said. I walk in the area regularly, and I agree we need 10-foot wide sidewalks to improve walkability. But this should be citywide And we have approved, unfortunately, a lot of new development in Sugar House without the 10-foot wide sidewalks required. So please, yes, let's pass this now. But I'm against the 10% pavers because they create issues for mobility impacted individuals, blind, people with strollers and wheelchairs. And I agree with Judy on the 150-foot maximum because without that, you effectively are encouraging monster developments instead of trying to create more of a walkable area. I mean, if you have a great big store that does nothing but one thing, it actually discourages walkability. You want to have more businesses, different businesses. Also, the park strip should be converted to walkable, bikeable paths in general for this a new and improved ordinance, but 2100 South is going to need a better plan, and it'll change this design standard. So essentially, I urge you to pass this now, tonight, but it needs to be updated in the near future. Those are my comments.
And that was the last comment for this item.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the comments. I will look for a motion, council members.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and adopt the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion by Council Member Dugan, a second by Council Member Wharton. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, having voted on the prevailing side, I would like to go back to item E14, which was the sublease on the Leonardo. I had voted in favor of closing the public hearing. Yeah, I know. I'm just saying I had voted to close the public hearing and defer action, and I would like to change my vote and vote to just take action tonight.
Okay, council members, it looks like we have a motion from Council Member Wharton to reconsider the vote on the subleases for the Leonardo. Do I have a second on the motion to reconsider?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Council Member Wharton, a second by Council Member Valdemoros. Is there any discussion just on the reconsideration? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So we are back to item E14, which is a resolution that would authorize sublease arrangements at the Leonardo. I would look for a motion or any discussion.
Madam Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and adopt the resolution for the sublease.
Second.
Thanks.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously as well. Thank you. Okay, we are somewhere in this agenda. We are on,
We're on E16.
yep, we're on F,
I mean F.
right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
you're right. There is no E16. Sorry.
We're at potential action item F1, which is an ordinance rezone at 915 South, 1300 East. I would look for a motion. And I think I said 915, it's 945 South, 1300 East. Do I keep saying the wrong thing? This is, let's try one more time, shall we? This is a rezone at 1945 South, 1300 East. I would look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council reject the ordinance. I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on. Madam Chair, I move that the council reject the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion by Council Member Wharton, a second by Council Member Dugan. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We are now on section G, which is our comment section. First, our Madam Mayor, thank you for being here. It's so nice to see you in person. Did I miss something?
Just to clarify, there is an item number 2 about budget amendment number 4 for potential action item, but earlier the council discussed taking action on that next week, so we're going to skip that.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, thank you for being here. Good to see you in person. And council members, do you have any questions for Madam Mayor? Nothing. We've got nothing for you, Madam Mayor, but thanks for being here. With that, we will turn to our general comment portion of our agenda for comments about general topics and items that were not scheduled for a hearing tonight. I went over the city council's rules of decorum earlier, and of course, those still apply here as well. We are accepting comments through Webex and telephone. Delaney Silman from our staff is helping to moderate and will be messaging with people in the chat. Taylor Hill is calling out the names of those people who wish to comment. When she calls your name, your mic will be unmuted. The timer will start for 2 minutes. When the 2 minutes is over, your mic will be muted again. We don't have anyone here in person, so this is only relating to people online. If you don't wish to speak, or if you don't finish your comments, please reach out to us with the rest of your comments through any number of ways to get a hold of us. And if you don't wish to speak, please just tell our staffer when you're unmuted, say that you are just here to listen. With that, I will turn to Taylor for general comments.
Thank you, Council Chair. It looks like we have 5 people here for general comment. The first of which will be Eric Edelman, followed by Daniel Schelling, and then Chris Bell. Eric, you're now unmuted.
Hello, I'm Eric Edelman. I'm here to talk today about the Foothills Trail Plan. I've exchanged emails with several members of the City Council and the Mayor herself. Over the last year and a half to 2 years, we've seen this plan for the Salt Lake City Foothills move forward, and it's been executed rather poorly. We've seen the Morris Meadows be destroyed. Currently, the fencing on top of the ridge line is in decay and personally needs to be fixed. There's also massive trenching that also needs to be replaced or filled back in. There was no master plan to begin with. And additionally, at the end of October, we also saw massive erosion issues due directly to the trails themselves in Lower City Creek Canyon. My concern moving forward is we've seen that there was no master plan. It doesn't appear that the Parks Department truly has a plan to maintain and manage the more than 100 miles of existing trail. I'm seeking the city, or asking the city, pleading with you, let's build this correctly. You know, I'm excited to hear that there's money set aside to build actual trailheads, but we need to utilize what we have and improve the existing trail network. What we've seen over the last year and a half isn't an improvement. It's actually a step backwards, and we can do better. So I say thank you for your time, and I appreciate your efforts.
All right, and next we will hear from Daniel Schelling, followed by Chris Bell, and then George Chapman. Daniel, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. During the heavy rainstorm of last October 25th, a large gully developed on the western side of City Creek, cutting across the recently built City Creek Loop Trail and undercutting Bonneville Boulevard. Estimated to be 12 feet wide, 12 feet deep, and extending 40 feet downslope, this washout rendered Bonneville Boulevard unsafe for cars, bicycles, and pedestrians. Half of the road had to be closed to all traffic. On November 19th, the Public Lands Department released an e-newsletter and Instagram message stating, and I quote, "The trail was impacted, but was not a contributing factor to the cause of the washout," unquote. This is a verifiably false statement. In fact, the poorly planned and shoddily built City Creek Loop Trail, constructed just below Bonneville Boulevard, was directly responsible for the washout and gully that undercut the road. While this trail was still under construction, it was repeatedly pointed out to the Public Lands Department that the trail's location was geologically unstable. In addition, rainstorms in late May and early August made the trail impassable, and resulted in the initial development of a gully that caused the undercutting and potential collapse of the road. And yet, no attempt was made by the Public Lands Department to address or even acknowledge the oncoming and predicted disaster. Given Public Land's attempt to avoid responsibility for this and other potential problems related to the planning and implementation of the Foothills Trail Plan, I hope that the City Council will take seriously its position to oversee the work that Public Lands is doing in our foothills, to hold Public Lands accountable where necessary, and to ensure that city funds are not released until Public Lands can show that critical scientific research has been completed prior to moving forward on any further construction plans in the foothills. Thank you very much and happy holidays.
And next we will hear from George Chapman, followed by Beverly Cooper. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, Salt Lake City has only hired 2 out of 12 authorized social workers. The reason seems to be the starting salary of a licensed stud counselor is $19 per hour, which is less than Walmart's starting wages. You need a new salary study like the county just asked for. I'm also concerned about shifting social workers to firefighters, since that could result in a bigger response to the mental health situations, which are exacerbated by our large vehicles, sirens, and lights. That's the last thing you want to send to somebody having a mental health situation. And again, 19 an hour is an insult. Salt Lake City Police Department has not justified the use of license plate readers. They shouldn't even be considered until there's some better policies in place. They've been misused in the past, and I know Senator Weiler years ago passed a bill banning them in Utah, although UTA has authority to use them for traffic studies. But I encourage the city to confirm that Utah law allows their use. I don't think it's allowed. And if you want to know what will attract health tech businesses, it's a park, like the Fleet Block. It also requires housing, preferably detached homes that are desired by health tech business employees. If you want them to stay and live here, you're going to have to build more or allow more detached homes. And again, I'm going to keep saying this. You have tens of thousands of acres available on the west side of Salt Lake City. Please open them up for housing. Otherwise, they'll drive to Ogden, which has housing that's hundreds of thousands of dollars less. Ogden housing is about $325,000. Salt Lake is $550,000. And by the way, Ogden home ownership is much higher, 53%.
And now we will hear from Beverly Cooper. Beverly, you're now unmuted.
Hi, I welcome the opportunity to speak to you again. And again, I'm here to talk about the trails. I agree with Polly Hart, who spoke earlier about the request for funding for trailheads. Way overdue. What kind of planning builds trails and then almost 2 years later comes back and asks if they can apply for funding for trailheads? Will they next come and ask for a grant for enforcement, which is not happening? Or maybe weed control, or maybe you'll have to increase the maintenance budget. It is time there is some planning in the Public Lands Department relative to the trails. I ask that the council not release any funding for trails until there is more planning. And what has happened to the funding benchmarks that were put in their budget? They're on a hiatus until June 22nd. Are any of the studies or other requirements in the budget being met? Have you heard anything? I haven't. Thank you.
And that was our last comment this evening.
Thank you to everyone who commented this evening. We are on to item H1, which we're actually skipping because we're not We don't need to have a motion right now, meeting remotely, because we're here. So skip that. We're on to unfinished business, item I1, which is an ordinance regarding EPA revisions to sewer regulations. I will look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council adopt the ordinance, which would take effect at the completion of the subsequent state regulatory process.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton, a second by Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We are now on to the consent portion of our agenda. I will look for a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Ferris. Any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. With that, council members and public, we are adjourned. Thank you for joining us this evening. Bye-bye.